My name is Lena, and I built an empire from the ground up, side by side with my sister, only to watch her try to bury me in a hospital bed she thought I'd never leave. She forged my signature, erased my legacy, and whispered, "Problem solved," while I lay silent but awake, hearing every betrayal. What would you do if the person you trusted most turned your own creation against you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Where are you listening from? I read every one. When I came to, the world wasn't loud or bright. It was like slipping into a cold bath with my mind surfacing but my body refusing to follow. Everything was dim and sterile. The faint hum of machines and the sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air. A dull ache pulsed at the base of my skull, but I didn't move. I didn't even try, not at first. Voices drifted through the room, muffled but close. I focused. One of them was hers, Elise, my sister's voice, unmistakable, cool, clipped, like she was giving instructions at one of our board meetings. But this wasn't a meeting. This was supposed to be a hospital. This was supposed to be about me. She won't wake up. The doctor said minimal brain activity, she said, too steady, too calm. It's tragic, really, but at least now the transition will be smoother. Another voice joined, male, familiar, but wrong in this context. Jace, my ex. You did what you had to do, he said softly. She always hesitated, always wanted consensus. You can't grow a company like that. I stopped breathing. My heart thudded in my ears. Jace, what the hell was he doing here? Why was he talking about me like I was already gone? Elise's heels clicked faintly as she paced. The board's already on edge, but once we finalize the asset transfer and revoke her voting power, it'll be locked in. I wanted to scream, to rip off the IV and sit up and curse them both, but I didn't. I kept still, eyes closed, breath slow, because something inside me clicked in that moment, sharp and silent. They thought I was comatose, and they were planning to bury me alive with my name still on the building. I didn't flinch, not even when I heard Elise pull the chair closer and lower her voice. Jace, we too close now. Once the paperwork's done, you can step back. I don't want anyone tracing this back to us. Step back from what? What had they done? I swallowed the rising bile and stayed still, counting the rhythm of the machines. My limbs were heavy, but my mind was racing. I wasn't imagining this. It wasn't a bad dream. It wasn't a misunderstanding. They'd planned this, and somewhere in that twisted plan was the accident that had landed me here. Jace sighed. You sure about this? I mean, she's your sister. She was in the way, Elise said coldly. She always was. Every vote, every decision, she questioned everything. You know how much faster we can move without her. There was silence for a few seconds. Then I heard paper rustling, a pen cap clicking. And the lavender pins? Jace asked, almost like he was trying to soften the moment. She gave me one, Elise said, bored. It's tacky. I left it on the tray. I didn't need to open my eyes to know she meant the small silver lapel pin lying near the bed, our company's signature symbol. I designed it the night we closed our first funding round, back when I believed we were building something honest, something lasting, back when I still believed Elise loved me. My throat tightened, but I forced the emotion down. The pin was still there. She hadn't bothered to hide it, to move it, like my presence, like my trust meant nothing. I drifted into memory, back to the warm light of our small office 8 years ago, Elise laughing barefoot on the carpet, holding the prototype pin in her hand like it was gold. We'd built a sustainable architecture firm from nothing, just 2 sisters and a ridiculous dream. I'd mortgaged everything to make it happen. My condo, my savings, my weekends. And now she was selling me off like dead stock. Something broke quietly inside me then, not loudly, not with fury. It was the kind of break that makes you sharper, more precise. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of knowing I was still here. I would stay still. I would stay quiet, and I would remember every single word because silence was no longer about peace. It was about strategy. Suddenly, the footsteps drew close. The bed dipped. A cold hand brushed my hair back. Elise leaned in, her perfume familiar but somehow poisonous now. It's better this way, she whispered. You always made things harder. I focused on keeping my heartbeat steady, my breathing slow, and in the deepest part of me, something lit up like steel under flame. She had no idea I was already awake. She had no idea I was already awake, and yet I stayed still. That moment, Elise's whisper hung in the air like the scent of antiseptic and deceit. I counted the seconds after she left, listening to the click of her heels until the door shut. Only then did I allow my eyes to twitch, testing my range of motion. I couldn't move much yet. My limbs were sluggish, as if my body was trying to catch up with my fury. A nurse entered not long after. She hummed softly, adjusting my IV and checking vitals. I kept my face relaxed still, just as I had for the past few days. "She's stable," the nurse said to someone just outside the door. "Her sister's been here daily, never misses a visit, but it's odd. She never asks about pain or recovery, just logistics." There was a pause, then a muttered reply I couldn't quite catch, but I noted the way the nurse's voice lowered. That strange discomfort again, like people felt something was off but didn't know what. Good. Let the tension grow. Later that afternoon, the door creaked open again. A deeper voice, smooth like honey but bitter underneath, cut through the room. "Jace." I didn't flinch. He strolled in like he owned the place, like this was some lazy Sunday visit to a woman who was long gone. But I was still here, trapped inside this body, watching, listening. "Looks peaceful, doesn't she?" he said to Elise, who followed him in with a coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. "The final asset draft will be ready by next week." My heart pounded. Final asset draft? He walked over to the bed, fingers brushing mine, too casual, too mocking. Then he leaned in, whispering loud enough for both of them to hear. "You always hated lavender. Ironic you branded the whole company with it." Elise laughed. She never had the vision, just sentiment. It was always about the message, the feeling. That's why she stalled every merger. "You'll handle the ethics board." "Please," she scoffed. "We frame it as a medical necessity, unstable leadership in a family-owned firm. They'll practically beg us to take control." So, that was their angle. Medical incapacity as a justification to push me out permanently. Jace and Elise didn't linger long. They left with the ease of people who thought they had nothing left to fear, but I remembered every word, every smirk. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. Night crept in. The hallway outside my room dimmed to quiet shadows and occasional whispers. Then came a moment I didn't expect. Dr. Nolan. He entered alone, clipboard in hand, his expression unreadable. He checked the machines, then turned toward me, brows slightly furrowed. I made a choice. Blink just once, not too fast, deliberate. He froze. I did it again. A faint movement of my hand followed. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully. "Oh, Lena," he whispered, barely audible. "Are you awake?" I parted my lips, dry. Every word felt like glass, but I got it out. "Don't tell them I'm awake. They did this to me." His eyes widened, but to his credit, he didn't gasp, didn't panic. He moved toward the door, locked it, then returned to my side. "I need you to repeat that," he said carefully. "I heard them," I croaked. "Elise and Jace, they're trying to take the company. They staged this." He nodded slowly, processing. "You're not delirious." "I wish I was," I whispered. "They planned it." He pulled up a chair, sat beside me. "All right, then. We'll do this carefully. I'll start logging every visit, every comment. We'll monitor communications, but Lena, you have to stay quiet. No one can know, not until we have proof." I closed my eyes, the tension loosening just slightly in my chest. An ally, finally, someone who didn't smile while sticking a knife in my back. The lavender lapel pin glinted faintly on the tray beside my bed. I'd given that to Elise the day we launched our company, a symbol of trust, unity, future. She'd left it here like an afterthought. Now it looked like a tombstone. It was almost midnight when Dr. Nolan slipped back into my hospital room. He carried no clipboard, wore no white coat, just a plain navy sweater, his ID badge tucked into his back pocket. He looked like a man running from his own conscience. He sat beside me in the dark without a word, then reached into his bag and pulled out a USB stick. I downloaded the footage from the security system like you asked, he whispered. Only one camera angle covers your cabinet, and you need to see this. He turned his laptop screen toward me. The video was grainy but clear enough. There she was, Elise, my sister, dressed in soft cashmere, acting like the grieving saint she performed so well for everyone else, but not here. Here alone, she moved with purpose. She opened my private cabinet with a key, one I hadn't even realized she had, and rifled through folders, files, my journal. It took effort. Each letter burned, but I scrawled, "Call Nora." Succession folder. She'll know why. Ivy read the note, eyebrows rising. Nora, she's still in ops, right? I nodded. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her front pocket. I won't say a word, but I'll make sure it gets to her. Later that night, I lay awake, the fluorescent light above my bed dimmed to a soft hum. I stared at the lavender pin still sitting by the tray. Its color had faded slightly. Time had dulled its shine. Like so many things we once believed permanent, it used to symbolize trust, partnership. Now it looked like a lie in enamel form. The next morning, Ivy returned on the early shift. She looked tense. I recognized the woman from the hallway, she said, not even bothering to whisper this time. That wasn't legal counsel. Her name's Tara, your sister's new assistant. The name slapped something inside me. I had warned Elise, warned her clearly not to hire Tara. She was reckless, too easily impressed by status. During her internship, she'd once forwarded confidential drafts to a personal email account, claiming it was for backup. That nearly cost us a deal. Now she was back, and she wasn't fetching coffee. She was asking for passwords, Ivy said. Tried to charm it, told them you'd want continuity. I let out the smallest breath. I wasn't surprised, just tired, exhausted by how far my sister was willing to go. I closed my eyes briefly, letting my mind replay the quiet betrayals, the restructurings, the demotions masked as promotions, Nora's former assistant suddenly becoming head of strategy overnight. Ivy let go. People cut off, my voice diluted. This wasn't just corporate politics. It was conquest. I took the notepad again, wrote slowly, "Thank you. But if she calls a vote to declare me incapacitated, I have one move left." Ivy didn't ask what it was, but as she left the room, I caught her whispering to herself, "They're going to regret underestimating you." She was right. This wasn't about saving a business anymore. This was about reclaiming truth, because even if I lost everything, I'd go down speaking the words they were desperate to silence. I had one last move before they took everything, but the game changed before I could play it. A week passed, maybe more. I lost track of time in that narrow slice of a world where the ceiling lights never dimmed, and the whispers outside your door could mean life or erasure. That morning, the air felt heavier. Ivy's face looked pinched when she came in for rounds, eyes darting toward the hallway before she even reached my bed. She kept her voice even, but I could hear the tension behind it. "They're calling the vote," she said quietly as she adjusted the monitors. "Elise is pushing hard, said you told her years ago you didn't want to be kept alive if something like this ever happened." I almost laughed. That wasn't just a lie. It was a perversion of the truth. I remembered that conversation. It wasn't about me. It was about our mother. When the doctors had suggested life support, I said she wouldn't want to be a shadow of herself. Elise had nodded, pretending to agree while already planning the estate, and now she was using my words against me. Ivy pulled a folded piece of paper from her scrubs pocket. "Dr. Nolan wants you to see this. It's happening today." It was a printout of a hospital transfer document, blank spaces filled in with tight, practiced strokes. My name sat at the top, but it read like an obituary, below it in bold letters. "Pending declaration of permanent incapacitation. Patient to be transferred to long-term care pending family consent." Family. That word used to mean something. She was orchestrating my removal in every sense. Legal, physical, symbolic. And the worst part, she almost succeeded. That afternoon, Nora sent Ivy a screenshot. She waited until Nolan stepped in for cover, then handed it to me quietly. It was the company website, my face gone, my name erased. A bold headline read, "A New Vision. The Harper Institute looks ahead under Elise Harper's sole leadership." The sidebar that once listed our co-founders was replaced by a minimalist press photo of Elise standing in front of our headquarters, arms crossed like she built it brick by brick herself, not even an in memoriam, just nothing. I stared at the screen, hollow, a ghost in my own story. Dr. Nolan came in that evening, his expression grim. She's going to win unless we move now. But I couldn't move, not physically, not emotionally. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out and filled with cement. Later that night, I whispered to Ivy, maybe she earned it. Maybe I was just easier to cut away. Ivy sat beside me without a word. The silence stretched. Then she stood and walked over to the sink. From her pocket, she pulled something small and set it on my bedside tray. It was the lavender pin, bent slightly at the edge, a little scratched, but unmistakable. I found it in the trash, she said, buried under your visitor log sheet. I didn't touch it at first, just stared. Years ago, I had that pin designed as a quiet symbol for our team. Lavender because it meant calm under pressure, roots because we'd built something that would outlast us. I'd offered one to Elise before the launch, she scoffed. Too soft, she said. If we want to be taken seriously, we lead with steel, not petals. I remember laughing gently. You can't build a legacy without roots, I told her. She waved it off. You're thinking like a gardener. I'm thinking like a general. And she was right. She was always preparing for war, but so was I just did it differently. That memory of that day, that conversation, cut through the numbness like sunlight under a door. I picked up the pin, cold in my hand, light, but suddenly heavier than anything I'd held in weeks. She's trying to bury me, I whispered, gripping the pin tighter. But I'm still the one who planted the foundation. Dr. Nolan stepped in a few minutes later, clipboard in hand. I'm ready, I told him, voice raw but steady. I want to be awake when she signs the papers. He looked at me, surprised but proud. Are you sure? I nodded. She's expecting silence, I said. But I'm about to leave a signature she can't forge. She wanted me erased, but I was about to leave a signature she couldn't forge. 2 days passed. The hospital halls had grown quieter, but not calmer. The tension had shifted, gone from invisible to nearly audible, the kind of pressure that made even the overhead lights seem too bright. I could feel the storm brewing just beyond the walls of my room. Dr. Nolan was more cautious with his visits now. The nurse roster changed without explanation. Ivy was gone, just gone. Her name wasn't on the schedule anymore, and no one would look me in the eye when I asked, silently blinking with purpose. I didn't have to be told. Elise had pulled a string, and Ivy had paid for standing too close to me, but that didn't mean we were done. That same morning, Nolan handed me a folded piece of paper and spoke in a low voice, just above a whisper. Nora got the note. She's in. The paper was a revised statement, exactly how I'd scripted it for Nora. It would be read aloud at the emergency board meeting that Elise scheduled, where she intended to finalize the transfer of company control. It read, Lena Harper explicitly documented her conditions for any change of ownership. Her signature from 4 years ago onward includes a looping H in Harper, which is absent from all documents filed by the current acting board chair. Any deviation invalidates her consent, per Clause 8 of the Foundational Charter. I'd changed my signature 6 years ago, a subtle shift, looped, careful, deliberate. Most people didn't know, but Nora did, and so did I. That was the bait. Elise had forged everything using my recent documents, all with my old signature. She wanted the papers to look current, but not too new. She underestimated how much I remembered, even from a bed where she thought I slept. The next morning, Nora walked into the board session with something better than paper. She had my voice. It was from a legal seminar 4 years earlier, a recording of me explaining signature evolution in executive documentation. You change how you sign over time, I'd said to a room of interns and young lawyers. But I always include a looping H now. It reminds me where I started, dated, time-stamped, public, unfiltered. According to Dr. Nolan, when the board liaison heard that playback, he quietly requested a delay, pending signature authentication. I imagined Elise sitting there, face stone cold, while her perfectly laid plan began to unravel. That night, she retaliated. She stormed into Dr. Nolan's office. I didn't hear it, I felt it. Doors slamming. Voices low and angry just beyond the walls. When Nolan stepped into my room later, his face was taut. "She threatened to have my license reviewed," he said simply, "accused me of obstruction, and Ivy's been reassigned out of this wing." Of course, she had. Elise never liked loose ends. The next day, just before noon, Elise appeared in my doorway. She wore soft grey cashmere, designer, but her presence was anything but gentle. She closed the door behind her with 2 fingers, then slowly walked over to my bed. "You're slipping," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "This hospital can't protect you forever." Her tone wasn't angry. It was satisfied, the kind of voice someone uses when they think the final nail's already in the coffin. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch, but when she turned to leave, she paused. Her eyes caught the glint of something pinned to the neckline of my gown. The lavender pin, worn like a brooch, sharp and deliberate. For a second, her mask cracked, just for a second. She left without another word. That evening, as dusk stretched across the Portland skyline, Dr. Nolan entered my room again, his posture tenser, more alert than usual. He didn't sit. He handed me a fresh sheet of paper, then looked toward the hallway. "I've sent the forged contract to a colleague at the Department of Business Oversight," he said. "We're one step away from a full investigation." I looked at the document. The ink still faintly smudged from the fax machine. It was the same fake form I'd seen before, the one where my name was signed without my hand, but now it was more than a betrayal. "It was evidence," he added. "When this blows open, it's going to be fast, and it's going to get ugly. Are you ready for that?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. "I didn't build all this just to have it stolen in whispers." He nodded, but before he turned to go, he looked back once more. "You know," he said gently, "the woman who walked in smiling last week might leave in handcuffs next time, and I hoped she did because this wasn't just a business anymore. This was war. The woman who walked in smiling might leave in handcuffs." That morning, the sun came through the narrow hospital window with a harshness I hadn't felt in weeks. It was as if the sky itself refused to soften the day. They'd scheduled the quiet signing for 11 a.m. Nora arrived just before 10, clutching her briefcase and keeping her head down as she passed the nurse's station. Dr. Nolan met her at the elevator and walked her to my room like a guest, not a co-conspirator. Inside, everything was ready. My hospital bed was freshly made, my tray table cleared, my voice steady in my chest, and beside me, neatly resting against a soft leather folder, sat the lavender pin. I had placed it there deliberately, not as an accessory, but a declaration. By 10:55, the room filled with calculated energy. The firm's legal team arrived first, 2 associates and a mid-level partner named Owen, who greeted Elise with practiced charm. Elise came in last, late by a few minutes, draped in ivory and navy like a politician preparing for a photo op. Her hair was glossy, her smile polished. Her posture said one thing: "This is already done." She didn't even glance my way as she sat down. Nora stood to the side, awkward but composed. Her eyes met mine for a brief second. I blinked once. She gave the slightest nod. Owen opened a folder and began laying out the documents. "We're here today to finalize the transition of executive and fiduciary authority from Miss Lena Harper to her designated successor, Miss Elise." He didn't get to finish because I moved slowly, deliberately. I pushed myself upright in the bed. The motion was slow enough not to startle, but unmistakable. The air shifted as the sound of rustling sheets filled the silence. Gasps broke the stillness like glass. Owen dropped the pen he was holding. Elise froze. I sat up fully, letting the blanket fall from my lap. I reached for the leather folder beside me and let my fingers rest lightly on the pin, not touching it, just reminding her it was there. Then I spoke. "You forged my name. You erased my name, and you thought I would stay quiet until I died." The room fell still. Elise blinked. "She's confused," she said quickly, standing up. "She's not mentally stable. Her doctor." "She's not confused," Nora cut in, stepping forward. "And her doctor is right here." Dr. Nolan entered then, as if on cue. "She's been alert for several days," he said, voice even, "and everything she's experienced during that time is recorded and legally admissible." Elise spun toward him. You're jeopardizing your career." "No," he said. "You did." Then, just as planned, the door opened again. Ivy walked in, flanked by 2 plainclothes officers and 1 detective in uniform. The man held a folder in his left hand and nodded to me before stepping into the center of the room. "Miss Elise Harper," he said calmly, "we have a warrant to seize all documentation pertaining to corporate succession, hospital authorization, and signature authentication fraud." One of the officers moved toward Owen and collected the papers from the table. Nora handed over a USB stick. "It contains surveillance footage, voice memos, and IP signature logs," she said, "including timestamps from Miss Harper's home internet." Elise backed up half a step, her face shifting, first rage, then disbelief, then something closer to panic. "You were nothing before me," she hissed. "You were just the girl with spreadsheets and lavender pins." I looked at her calmly. "And you were just my sister," I said, "until you decided I was in your way." She didn't respond. Her lips parted, but no words came out. One of the officers gently placed a hand on her arm, not to arrest, not yet, but to make it clear this wasn't her room anymore. For the first time since she'd orchestrated my fall, she looked small, but I knew her too well to think this was over. I thought that was the final blow, but she had one more in her pocket. 24 hours after the signing room exploded into chaos, I was still in my hospital bed, but everything else had shifted. The video of me sitting up, confronting my sister, and calling out the forgery had made its way online. It was clipped, captioned, and spreading like wildfire across business news and social platforms. My name had returned to the firm's official site by morning, a soft update tucked near the bottom of the homepage. "We regret any prior misrepresentation regarding the founding of the Harper Institute." There was no apology, just a razor rewritten. Former staff began messaging me, some I hadn't heard from in years. "We always knew. She never could lead without you. I'm so sorry." But what I felt wasn't triumph. It wasn't even relief. It was quiet, unsettlingly quiet, like standing in a house after a storm, waiting for the roof to creak one more time before it caves in. That creak came faster than I expected. That evening, just as Ivy was helping me review discharge forms, Nora burst into my room, phone in hand, pale as snow. "It's all over the news," she said breathlessly. "Someone leaked documents. Lena, they're saying you funneled corporate funds offshore." I blinked, not understanding. She handed me the phone. There it was, a breaking headline from a national outlet. "Founder of sustainable design firm implicated in secret offshore scheme." The article included screenshots of transaction logs, foreign account numbers, and what looked like my signature on internal transfer forms. I couldn't speak. The air in the room thinned, my fingers went cold. Nora continued, her voice shaking. "It's bad. It's coordinated. Anonymous whistleblower, perfectly timed release. There's already a call for an emergency vote to suspend you again." I sat motionless, staring past the edge of the bed. So this was her final hand, not to win, but to ruin me completely. Even if she lost the company, she wanted my name to die with it. I barely heard Nora leave. I don't even remember what time the nurse dimmed the lights. I just remember whispering aloud into the room after she was gone. Maybe this is it. Maybe all of it. The coma, the fight, the reveal. It was just a delay. Maybe I'd been foolish to believe I could outmaneuver someone who had no moral ceiling. I laid back against the pillow, ready to ask Dr. Nolan to quietly arrange my transfer, someplace no one would look, but just before I closed my eyes, Ivy returned, holding something in her hands. "This was buried in the bottom of the visitor bin," she said softly, walking over. "It's got your handwriting." She placed the worn manila folder in my lap. I opened it out of habit more than hope. Inside, paper yellowed at the edges, was a memo I'd written 4 years ago, my handwriting, my original notes about implementing tiered financial permissions for large transfers, my idea to safeguard executive abuse. Attached to it, clipped with a rusted paperclip, was a revised draft with notes from Elise, her handwriting. There in the margin next to my proposed routing structure, she'd scribbled, "Route split via Tier 3 authorization can be shielded through consulting Shell, efficient and untraceable." I stared at it for a second. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or sob. She had annotated her own blueprint for laundering and forgotten to destroy it. This wasn't a backup file. This wasn't a PDF or cloud draft. This was paper, real, tangible, and it matched the leaked whistleblower path point for point. Nora returned 2 hours later with her laptop and a scanner. We sent it to our legal team, who confirmed it within hours. The leaked evidence had been built from the exact outline Elise had once authored. They layered metadata from old email logs, which showed the revision draft had originated from her IP address. It was her hand, her pen, her mistake. I didn't call the police, not yet. Instead, I made one phone call to a former PR manager named Zara. I told her I needed a podium, a microphone, and a live stream. I told her I had something to say, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in truth. The next morning, I stood, shaky but upright, in front of a row of cameras in the hospital's conference hall. Behind me, the lavender pin rested against my heart. I looked directly into the lens and said, "They say reputation is what people think of you, and character is what you are when no one's watching. But sometimes, even when people are watching, they still choose to lie." I held up the annotated memo. This is what power looks like when it forgets to cover its tracks. I paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Power doesn't come from what you take. It comes from what you can still build after they try to erase you. I stepped down without answering a single question. As I turned from the podium, Nora slipped the folder back into my bag and whispered, "She's going to see this, and it's going to burn." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. They thought this was the end of my story. It was only the start of theirs. 7 weeks passed, but the quiet never returned, not fully. The days after the press conference were filled with subpoenas, interviews, frozen accounts, and one powerful headline after another. It was surreal, watching the world discover what I had lived quietly for so long. My name, once erased, was now carved into every legal document tied to the investigation, not as a criminal, as a survivor. Elise had been indicted on 4 counts: forgery, corporate fraud, and attempted theft of controlling interest. She pleaded not guilty, of course, and still wore that half smile in the courtroom, but when the judge denied her bail, citing risk of further tampering, her mask slipped for the first time. She didn't look like the woman who'd walked into my hospital room in pearls, whispering threats. She looked cornered and furious. I didn't attend every hearing. I didn't need to. I was already back at the office, not as CEO, not as a martyr either, just as Lena. The nameplate on the door had been replaced, not flashy, just, Lena Harper, founding partner. The room felt different. No tension, no perfume clinging to the chairs, no second voice interrupting mine mid-sentence. Behind me in a small glass case sat the lavender pin, restored, framed, the same pin Elise once tossed aside as too sentimental. I tapped the side of the display lightly and turned to record a message for our firm's new leadership program. The camera blinked red. I took a breath. Some of us build with roots. Some try to build with mirrors. You learn the difference when the storm comes. I smiled just enough. 2 days later, I took a personal day. It was a clear Saturday morning, and the drive to our childhood home outside Salem was longer than I remembered. The trees lining the driveway had grown wild, and the mailbox leaned slightly left, but the house still stood. I had called ahead. Our mother's caretaker left a box for me on the porch. Documents, old school files, and one mystery envelope tucked beneath. I didn't expect much, maybe a few tax returns or forgotten sketches. Instead, I found a folded note handwritten in a younger version of Elise's script from when we were barely teenagers. "We'll build everything together," it read, scrawled in purple marker. "We'll make Mom proud. We'll change the world." There were hearts drawn beside it, crooked, sincere. I held it in my hands for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just folded it again neatly and slid it back into the folder. We had believed it once, both of us, but belief isn't the same as character, and promises written in marker don't hold up in court. That evening, I joined Ivy, Nora, and Finn for dinner. We opened a cheap bottle of wine and ordered enough Thai takeout to feed a party. Finn made a toast, half joking, half sincere, to the only woman I know who came back from a coma and still managed to outnegotiate a criminal with a law degree. We laughed. I laughed, really laughed. That ache in my chest, the one I hadn't named since waking up in that hospital room, started to dissolve. Later, as I stood near the window, looking down at the city lights, Nora came beside me. "Do you regret not pressing charges sooner?" she asked quietly. I thought for a moment, then shook my head. Justice isn't a sprint, it's a rebuild, brick by brick. She nodded, understanding. We didn't say more. Weeks later, I walked into the Foundation's first mentorship gala, a program for underfunded female entrepreneurs led by women who knew what it felt like to be silenced, overlooked, or written out. I wore a navy blazer that night, simple, but pinned near my collar was that lavender brooch, no longer a secret, no longer soft. As I stepped onto the stage, the first speaker turned to the crowd and said, "To the woman who showed us silence can still roar." Thank you, Lena. I didn't cry. I stood tall, and I smiled, not for the cameras, but for the part of me that once believed I was nothing without her. She signed my name like it was hers to take, but I signed her ending with truth, not ink. Have you ever had to fight just to prove you were part of something you helped build? Tell me in the comments.